So, you know the three issues that she brings up.
Okay.
Wanaharakati, wanavamia mambo yetu, wasije kutuharibia, walishaharibu kwao, washavuruga kwao. Does she have a point?
Good. As I had mentioned, it's a context issue. It's a question of when you talk about integration, it means different things for different people. If you talk about within the East Africa community, Tanzania does not see integration the way Kenya sees integration. That's
fair enough. But
number two,
from her perspective, in terms of her reactions now.
That's why I'm saying, how do they view integration? When you talk about Jumuiya, what level or what form of integration do they foresee? They foresee a carefully balanced or more or less managed form of integration that does not interfere with the national character of a nation vis-a-vis the region. So that you find Tanzania being extremely territorial and very, and when talk about Tanzania, as I think the President himself was saying, talk about Tanzanian government under CCM. CCM has never seen Tanzania within open border context. For them, it's closed shop. And they would have a reason to fear the kind of democratic space Kenya enjoys. They have a problem with that. Now, let me use Samia. It is very clear in her statement, she's focused towards the election. The first 1 year when she got in, she actually undid quite a number of the draconian policies and laws that had been applied and implemented by his predecessor, that is John Magufuli Pombe. And that's why all of a sudden she got this really nice review that she may be a break from the past. She may be the leader that leads them into a new constitution. Remember, Tanzania is facing two problems. People should not forget the context. Why is Tundu Lissu in jail again? Or why is he being charged? He's being charged for two reasons. One, treason. Another one is that he's likely to incite violence. And what is his main point of agitation? Tundu Lissu says it was an agreement even for the opposition for him to come back to Tanzania after he survived assassination under Magufuli was on the context that the elections will be done under a new constitution or at the bare minimum, minimum reforms that the way Kenya did in '97. And as a result, actually it was Samia Suluhu, the current president, who oversaw that conversation, and even the first leader of Chadema, that is Freeman Mbowe, was the one leading the conversation on behalf of opposition. But soon after, Freeman Mbowe was arrested for agitation, and then Tundu Lissu came in and took over the Chadema, and as a result, he's now being charged. Why? Because an election is coming in. So CCM under Samia Suluhu has just gotten back to its original characterization. That's why they would say, don't bring your bad manners. What they mean is that the Kenyan way of democratization is not in tandem with theirs. Same thing as Uganda. And that's what Martha Karua faced when she went to defend Kizza Besigye. Because she went and said, look, our legal practicing, which would be similar across Jumuiya and our East Africa law, would mean Kizza Besigye was supposed to be tried in a civilian court. Now, the same thing. The team that was going to Tanzania, as she has said, it was about solidarity. But more importantly, the reason why it really ticked the Tanzanians negatively is the kind of awareness that they were bringing. Number two, prominence beyond the borders. Tanzanians would have preferred the Tundu Lissu case to just be a case of political competition, because as we speak, Chadema has been banned from participating in the election. So with the Kenyan contingent, and you could see it was a big team. Look, two former Chief Justices, that is Willie Mutunga and David Maraga. Did it not concern you how they applied it selectively? That's the reason that David Maraga was allowed in, but Mutunga was not allowed in.
Because they could see issues with the specific
activism. Because they would then connect Mutunga with activism, having served with Ford, and Mutunga having been more outspoken. So you could see it was a fine line. For them, maybe they saw Maraga as harmless and not having per se activistic or activism character or traits or history behind. So they would say, okay, fine, for this one, no problem. He's just a jurist. He is a CJ emeritus. Let him come be an observer. But for the rest, when you talk about Martha Karua, she is a face of activism. At the moment, even in Kenya here, by virtue that one, she's done a presidential race, she was among the first elected women leaders, and that limelight that comes with Martha Karua, having also been in Uganda, is is what they were really afraid of.
Okay.
Lastly, what I would say, I would pick how the Kenyan government responded, which then shows a fine line, whereby the Kenyan government says, let's appreciate the different levels of democratization that we have across the region. And it's a case of why don't we give our neighbors a chance to grow? So you'd find that the Kenyan government would prefer the diplomatic approach of good neighborliness and say, okay, fine, let's appreciate our differences and move along with it. But as the Prof had mentioned, he said very clearly, separate CCM in government and the president and the people. The Tanzanian people would easily identify with this because Tundu Lissu is their darling. By virtue, he's asked for constitutional reforms. They would really identify with that. But CCM and government will be uncomfortable with the same. So I feel that our integration question then, or our Jumuiya dream, becomes a focus as we prosecute this. The same becomes an issue. Does it mean then going forward, our East African countries will always have this double standard rule? That when it comes to what they are comfortable with, okay, they'll say, fine, we are one region. But what they feel is uncomfortable, then they'll flash the national card. That is now the key question. And it's not just Tanzania. The elections and the changes that are likely to happen within the region, the same will apply to Burundi, Rwanda, DRC. When we went in, the same reaction came in. You remember the DRC, Tshisekedi threw out the East African contingent simply because they got uncomfortable, because it wanted them to have an offensive mandate. Then they preferred diplomacy. So I find that being a question and a challenge that we have to face if you are to really get to a point of where we say we are one Jumuiya with one culture, political culture that applies across the borders.